Good morning. I'm David Breeden. I'm the Senior Minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, and this is Coffee and Wisdom, where we look at some of the strains that have led into the thinking in American popular culture, and also specifically at humanism in the past, now, and where it may be going in the future. This week, I've been looking and will be looking at some people from the late 19th and through the mid 20th century who really had a great deal of effect on the ways our ideas of spirituality developed in the Western world, particularly in the UK and United States. I'm titling this week, Some Have Thoughts, Some Have Oughts. That's really based on a little saying that developed during the time period. There is this large difference between the mass of humanity and these people who examine esoteric, secret, hidden knowledge out there. And one of the central figures in that is George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, who may have been born in 1866 or maybe 1872 or perhaps 1877. He died for sure in France in 1949. He was a mystic, a music composer, philosopher, spiritual teacher. An absolutely fascinating guy, and we can't talk about his ideas in the past tense. There are Gurdjieff societies all over the world. If you want to do a little web searching, you can find some of them and read about their take on what's going on. He's probably most famous for something that he invented, which is the Enneagram. We see it in the photograph here. That's the 9 sides. Some of you probably have taken the Enneagram personality test. The actual test is not based in Gurdjieff's thought, and he didn't invent it, but it did use the Enneagram as a way to figure out people's personalities. But you see how it goes here is this very esoteric idea. This goes here, this goes there, this goes there, he was very into numerology. He thought the numbers 3, 7, and 9 were particularly important. So that's where that comes from. And probably, when people mention the Enneagram, to me anyway, I always, I'm afraid, look a little bit skeptical because, I know where it came from, and I'm not quite sure that it makes as much sense as we like to think. I think it's a lot like astronomy, or astrology rather, that, if you really look at anything long enough, you'll start seeing meaning in it that probably isn't actually there. But that's just a skeptic's view for you. He called his ideas the work or the system, or most usually the fourth way. Now, those of you who have been following along, you remember Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy from the mid to late 19th century. And yesterday I talked about another person in this line, Edward Carpenter, also who traveled to India and talked about cosmic consciousness, this idea of that Hinduism has some very ancient knowledge in it. Gurdjieff, like Madame Blavatsky, comes out of the difficulties that were occurring in the Russian Empire in the 19th century that led up to the Russian Revolution, something that Gurdjieff himself did have to flee eventually, and he ended up in France. But he also, like Madame Blavatsky, claimed to have traveled to very exotic realms and to have learned secret knowledge from these very wise sages that most people never run into. Again, this is a very 19th century thing. And of course, nowadays we would know where people had traveled, but in those days you could be a little more along the lines of exaggeration there. His claim, basically, the foundational claim is that most of humanity exists in a waking sleep or a hypnotized state, and that is created by the idea of the ego, that that I am separate from reality. This is very basic to some Hinduism, some ideas within Hinduism, and also it is part of Madame Blavatsky's ideas. So that's the basic idea. So he saw the quest for the sacred or the holy working out in 3 different ways through time. One was the faker, the ascetic, the person who absolutely scarifies the body, starves the body, naked in the cold, all sitting on flagpoles, et cetera, et cetera. Someone who really gets rid of the temptations of the flesh by absolutely ignoring them. That's one way to get to the holy, he teaches. Another way is through the way of the yogi. Again, he did understand yoga as the positions, as we do often in the United States, rather than any larger philosophical method, which actually sometime we need to talk about, because there's a lot to yoga that isn't about body positions, but that's the way he was looking at it. And then the monk, which he saw as mental contemplation. So what he's saying is that we approach the holy or the sacred through emotions, the body, and the mind. And now we need a fourth way to go on into this cosmic consciousness. You'll see this is a performance in South Korea, by the way, of his movements that he invented. And you see the Enneagram in the background there. Now, this fourth way incorporates sacred dance and uses music that was hidden or folk, never written down, and then also teachings from the past. The real idea here is that secret knowledge is being hidden in plain sight, that the Bible is the Bible. You can read the Christian story, the kingdom of heaven, and all of those things. But actually, those ideas are only the print version of something that's much more esoteric and actually leads toward this cosmic consciousness idea. And then the contradiction of it all, that this only passes through oral translation from master to student, master to student. So actually the truth can't be or never has been written down. And that's key to the way that Gurdjieff was talking about these things. A very famous little quote from him: if you want to lose your faith, make friends with a priest. Of course, he grew up Eastern Orthodox Christian. Another saying: a man can only attain knowledge with the help of those who possess it. This must be understood from the very beginning. One must learn from him who knows. And this is the old idea of the master passing something down to the student, but that this knowledge is not written down anywhere. It has to go through oral translation and transmission. Very central to esotericism in general. And again, the esoteric claim then is that knowledge is hidden inside religious traditions that can be known only through oral teachings. So, for example, the kingdom of heaven, the Christian church has definitely defined this traditionally. Nowadays, in the 21st century, we have some other ideas about that, but there is a tradition that says it is this. And Gurdjieff will say, well, actually, this hidden tradition says that it's this thing over here. It's about a mental state. It has nothing to do with the end of the world or heaven or hell or any of that stuff. It's all about self-actualization and realization. And that's kind of the center of where Gurdjieff was going. He also was a composer, often taking folk tunes from his native Armenia and that area of the world. And then he worked with the Russian composer Thomas de Hartmann. And you can find quite a bit of music out there that they co-wrote, some of it for these dances that Gurdjieff taught. Others of it just kind of enjoyable music. And the Gurdjieff Ensemble is one of the groups that travels the world, still playing this material today. Now, one of the interesting things is that Gurdjieff was always saying, guess what? You can't write it down. So this is central to his thought that you have to come to people like me to learn what the esoteric traditions are. So why write it down? Which is a good question. And Gurdjieff did avoid writing down his ideas for a very long time, but toward the end of his life, he began to do that. And as we will see tomorrow, some of his students, disciples, disobeyed his orders and did write down his teachings and did publish them going on into the next generation. So let's look for a little bit about something that he wrote. All and Everything is one of his books. And it goes like this. Inner influences prevent a man from falling under external influences. Okay, maybe it is for the best. Inner influences and inner slavery come from many varied sources and many independent factors. Independent in that sometimes it is one thing and sometimes another, for we have many enemies. Now, I don't know about you, but this seems to me to be kind of, wheel spinning and not really saying very much at all. There are so many of these enemies that life would not be long enough to struggle with each of them and free ourselves from each one separately. So we must find a method, a line of work, which will enable us simultaneously to destroy the greatest possible number of enemies within us from which these influences come. Okay. I get that, I think. I said that we have many independent enemies, but the chief and most active are vanity and self-love. Ding, ding. This is very traditional across all religious traditions, that the ego is what separates us from true knowledge, right? One teaching even calls them representatives and messengers of the devil himself. And so you see where Gurdjieff is kind of a little bit confusing. What are you talking about? What are you really talking about? And if we really dig down, are you saying anything unique or interesting? That's a very debatable point, as we will continue to look at this week. I do invite you to do a little Googling about Gurdjieff, fascinating man, and the music's good. And there are Gurdjieff societies all over the world, and you can find their websites that will take a little less skeptical view of him. It's still very much alive in the world. Was this guy just a charlatan, or was he after something and struggled and got some good ideas, but just really kind of finally failed to communicate what he was trying to communicate? It's an open question, but we will get to one of his main disciples tomorrow. Thanks for listening today. You can help out, get our message out there at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis by going to PayPal or firstunitarian.org/donate. We would very much appreciate the help. Also, you can find out lots of things about FUS and about humanism on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I'll see you tomorrow with a little bit more about this hidden knowledge that's out there in the world. Thank you.